Hello everyone. We're gathered here today to celebrate 30 years of ministry with the Cochrane family. Now, back in 1979, Van graduated, and for the last 30 years, him and Lloyd have dedicated their lives to serving God. Now, since most of us are only familiar with the last 10 years, I thought we'd put together a little presentation here. We'll have several people speak, and really we just want to know a little bit more about the life of Van Cochrane. So Van, if you would, tell us about your first childhood memory.
I remember in a very vague memory in my distant past sitting in a hole with my feet down in the hole and seeing a police officer pointing at me and then a bunch of people running towards me. And I had gotten away from home and wandered to the main street of town. And I walked out onto the main street and sat down in a pothole because I thought it was a good place to play.
How about your family growing up? Tell us some of the memories that you have of your mom, your sisters.
I remember baking with my mother, and when I was a little boy, before I went to school even, and I still just love to cook. I like to. It's very relaxing for me to spend time in the kitchen, creating something. Although I don't bake, I think I got that from her. I remember being at the house when my dad was walking around the back of the house to come in, and my mother saying, "Come on, let's jump on the couch and pretend we're sleeping." And so I remember snuggling up with her on the couch, pretending we were sleeping when Dad came in after work. And I remember my older sister playing hide the button on our porch. We had a really large porch around the house, and so we'd go outside and play hide the button. I don't know if you ever played hide the button or not, but you just have to leave one little piece of it showing, and then the other person has to find it. It was not too complicated.
Now, in junior high school, you had a large circle of friends that you were very close to. Why don't you tell us about that?
I had two different groups of friends, some older guys that weren't really my friends, because every time I saw them, they would beat me up. And then I had younger guys that I kind of ruled in my own cruel way, that if they didn't do what I told them to, I'd punch them. And
wow. Tell you what, let's go on to when you were saved. Why don't you tell us about that moment?
Turned the TV on, and there was nothing on except, I started off with Billy Graham and went the whole way around the dial. And that was back in the days when you had to turn the dial to go change channels. And came back to Billy Graham, and I just sat back and started listening. And I'd grown up going to Sunday school, and so I understood the gospel, and I understood what it meant really to be a believer. I had decided that I would make that decision when I was an old man, and that I thought it would be good to be a Christian as an old man. And but that night, as I'm listening to Billy Graham, I just was so convicted of my sin and of my need to be forgiven and to deal with all the guilt that I had heaped up. Mm-hmm. That at the end of his message, when he gave an invitation to pray, I was thinking consciously to myself. I remember thinking, how could I ever change? I know being a Christian is more than saying a prayer, and I don't think I could change. And I just remember God just pressing into my mind not to worry about that He would take care of that. And so so that night I prayed with Billy Graham at the end of that message, and just felt an incredible sense of release and relief and freedom from guilt, and went on and struggled then for several months until my grandfather died, and at his funeral I spent time with my cousin who had just become a believer, and that really helped to solidify things for me. And then I reconnected with some Christians that were at the church I had grown up going to, and it was when I connected there again and started memorizing the Bible, and that was when I really started to grow. So then going back to college and living with the Christian guys I did really helped me a lot in my growth.
Van, you've certainly had a full life. Why don't you share with us one of the most difficult moments that you've experienced over the last 30 years?
I'm sure this wasn't as big a deal as I thought it was at the time, but I trimmed my mustache and kept trimming it until I thought I had trimmed it way down too much, which is,
Wow. Okay. Your friend Dave Eber, very close friend of yours, at this time in your life, you were just married. Now, that's a big change for anybody. So your relationship with Dave at that moment, did you continue to hang out with him? Did you travel? Perhaps take him on trips with you and Lori?
Like, we took him back to East Brady one time, and he went out into the woods and came back. This was like in 10-degree weather. He came back covered in animal dung. So he had found some fresh dung somewhere and rolled in it. And so I had to bathe him outside that night. And then the next morning he gagged up cigarette butts. And you remember the old beer cans would have the flip top that would come all the way off. He gagged one of those and coughed that up. And so that was what irritated me about him, just that he would, if he got a certain distance from you, then he owed you no allegiance whatsoever. He was on his own.
Interesting. That's quite a unique relation. Howie was another good friend of yours, and there's a story here that you actually asked Howie to join you on your honeymoon. Is that true?
I was just oblivious. I had no idea that was how she would feel, with that happening. And so, yeah, that did happen.
Yeah, not sure what you were thinking there, but later on, I have another story here. Once you were married, Lori, just tremendously supportive in your endeavors, cooking, cleaning, just mothering your children. But there was one evening, a Monday night, that you came home expecting the usual spaghetti and meatballs, but instead there were pork chops prepared for you. How did that make you feel?
And that was a very dark week for me. I felt very depressed all week long, and wrote stuff in my journal that, like, God, where are you? And you talked big, but when it comes to showing up, and stuff like that.
Van, one of the churches you led was in Owasso, Michigan. You were there for many years. Many relationships developed. When you left that church, what impact did that create on the community?
There was one news report on CNN that tied my departure from Michigan to the ultimate downfall of the auto industry, but I don't think it's true.
Okay. Interesting. That's very interesting, Van.